You must have heard the legend of Jason Voorhees, the unstoppable machete-wielding killer who haunted the woods of Camp Crystal Lake. But what if I told you there was one person who not only stood against Jason, but actually killed him? And even more chilling was the fact that this very person was supposed to replace Jason altogether. You heard that right. This person was Tommy Jarvis, a kid genius and horror fanatic whose life was forever twisted by Jason's curse. Over the course of 3 films, Tommy Jarvis had undergone a transformation from an innocent horror fan to a man who is haunted by evil itself. And as the events turned out, one particular debate has raged on among the fans for decades. Was Tommy Jarvis supposed to become the new Jason Voorhees? Was he meant to replace Jason as the next unstoppable killer? In today's video, we'll try to find credible answers to these questions. We'll check out the full story of the Tommy Jarvis trilogy, right from his innocent beginnings in Friday the 13th, the final chapter, to his haunted avatar in A New Beginning, and finally, his fatal mistake that resurrected Jason in Jason Lives. To find the truth, let's go back to 1984, to the very moment when the Friday the 13th franchise thought it was ending, but accidentally gave birth to its most mysterious character. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who was Tommy Jarvis? Audiences meet Tommy Jarvis for the very first time during Friday the 13th, the final chapter from 1984. And it was clear from the start that he wasn't your typical slasher movie character. He was a curious and smart 12-year-old with a wild imagination who loved everything about horror. Played by Corey Feldman, this slightly nerdy kid was obsessed with movie monsters and stuff related to them. As a skilled young artist, his room was like a horror lab, filled with foam latex heads, makeup kits, monster fangs, fake blood, and Frankenstein posters everywhere. You can tell from this fact alone that the boy wasn't afraid of monsters. Instead, he celebrated them. He was what we call a true horror geek. Tommy is living with his mother and sister near Camp Crystal Lake, the very place that Jason Voorhees had converted into his personal hunting ground. As a kid, Tommy was more fascinated than fearful about the stories of Jason's carnage. And actually, that was the whole point. Writer Barney Cohn and director Joseph Zito intentionally made Tommy like a mirror image of the fans themselves. He was shown as a kid who knew the horror genre inside out and loved horror stories. However, even the horror fan inside him didn't know at the time that Tommy was about to meet horror face to face in the worst possible way. The role of Tommy Jarvis in the Friday the 13th franchise. Life was going on for Tommy and his family in Friday the 13th, the final chapter, 1984, until one stormy night when the peaceful cabin became a battleground. Jason's rampage had now reached Tommy's home. What follows is chaos, screams, blood, and horror. It was only then that Tommy's love of monsters actually turned into a fight for survival. Jason kills nearly everyone around him, which leaves a helpless Tommy and his sister Trish as the final prey. But unlike the other characters who died in a mode of panic, Tommy wasn't just hiding. As a true horror fan, he was observing the events keenly, analyzing and planning his safety. He was slightly afraid too, but still had a trick up his sleeve. Using his study of the monster, Tommy decides to go for the wildest possible move in the movie's climax. He shaves his head and transforms himself to look exactly like a young and deformed Jason. This was a psychological trick designed to throw Jason off balance. And boy, it worked. Jason was damn confused for a split second. As he sees the image of his deformed younger version, he hesitates, and that's when Tommy strikes. Fueled with terror and adrenaline, along with the instinct to protect his sister, Tommy strikes relentlessly with a machete till Jason stops moving. Jason Voorhees was dead, or so it seemed. Looking at Jason's lifeless body, you could hope that the nightmare was now over. But as Tommy stood there, trembling with a blood-covered face, his wide, empty eyes told another story. That haunting stare certainly wasn't the face of victory. It was something else entirely. That single look became one of the most chilling endings in slasher history. The boy who killed Jason lost a piece of his own humanity that night. Jason's body was gone, but his darkness had found a new home. When you kill a monster, what happens next if the monster starts living inside you? Jason's death was only the start of Tommy's haunting saga that followed him throughout the trilogy. While the final chapter showed him as a child survivor who kills Jason, the later ones follow his life and collapsing mental health further as he evolves from a child survivor to a troubled teenager, and finally to the man who accidentally unleashed Jason's undead form. A New Beginning, 1985. The teen haunted by his past. Years have passed since that bloody night by the time A New Beginning rolls around in 1985. Tommy has grown from being a wide-eyed kid to a quiet, withdrawn teenager who is left in deep shock owing to the events of that night. In the ripe youth of his life, Tommy is living in institutions, trying to recover from what he did. But there was no healing him. After all, how do you really heal from killing a man if he had refused to die? Jason was still there, lurking inside him. Tommy starts to be plagued by Jason's hallucinations everywhere. From behind doors to mirrors, and even in his dreams, there was no respite for him. At night, he wakes up screaming, not sure of what's real anymore. This is where we get to see the spotlight shift to Tommy's real psychological scars. He has survived the horror, yes, but the trauma left behind was as real as any machete wound. But of course, things go into a spiral once again. Mysterious deaths start happening around Tommy in a signature style. The killings are brutal, and the killer is found to be wearing Jason's hockey mask. So, has Jason returned? Or is it just Tommy who is losing his mind and becoming more and more like the monster he had destroyed? After all, deep down, he was always fascinated with Jason. The question that drives A New Beginning is, has Tommy become Jason? The film teases both the possibilities and leaves the audience guessing till the end. And when the climax hits, it's shocking. Apparently, Jason isn't back, but someone is copying his methods of killing to cover their own spree of murders. But that's not Tommy. But it's also not a relief for Tommy's mental condition. He's still going paranoid in his fight against Jason's memories, which have now worked their way into his soul. A New Beginning, the teen haunted by his past, might not be the most popular one in the franchise, but the way it shows the emotional center of Tommy's journey is really special. The monster is gone, but the psychological fear is eternal. From there onwards, Tommy's story moves on to Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. Our hero Tommy Jarvis is now an adult, played by Tom Matthews. This version of Tommy is determined to put an end to his nightmare once and for all. And what better way to end the fear than facing it face to face? The film opens with a stormy night, with a determined Tommy heading towards Jason's grave. He plans to dig up Jason's grave and destroy it. But in his effort to end the horror, Tommy happens to resurrect Jason. Tommy stabs a metal pole into Jason's corpse during the thunderstorm, and lightning strikes that very moment, resurrecting Jason. Jason is reborn, but not as a human. He is now undead. And this zombie era of Jason makes him even more unstoppable. This is an interesting twist, especially in the way it perfectly ties Tommy's story arc. He killed Jason in the final chapter. In A New Beginning, he was haunted by him, and now in Jason Lives, he accidentally brings him back. But Tommy immediately attempts to correct his mistake after Jason is resurrected. He sends a warning to the local sheriff and tries to save campers all throughout the length of the movie. In the climax, we see Tommy luring Jason into the lake, bound by heavy chains around his neck. Jason finds himself trapped beneath the surface with his eyes glaring through the water, perfectly capturing the tone of the series. Evil never dies, it just waits. Tommy's final line, "It's over, it's finally over," is tragically ironic, because we know it's never really over. Paramount really meant business with the final chapter. They had a good plan for Jason's story to end. Critics and, most importantly, parents all around the country were already attacking slasher films for being trash entertainment. Hence, the studio had taken the decision to finally bury Jason, both literally and figuratively. Their plans for Jason were great, but they themselves didn't realize the whole separate impact Tommy had created on the franchise. His character humanized the series in a way that Jason never could. In a world where Jason stands for ruthless, silent death, Tommy is his opposite. He's human, emotional, and deeply flawed. It's only the coming of them together that provides depth to the franchise. Their strange connection makes Friday the 13th different from being just another slasher series. It's a story of how horror infects the human soul and how evil changes those who dare confront it. Was Tommy supposed to be the new Jason Voorhees? After looking at the roles of both Tommy and Jason throughout the series, we finally reach the big question. Was Tommy Jarvis really supposed to become the new Jason? Don't be shocked, but yes, that was the original plan. It's sad that it had to be scrapped following fan reaction. It's a theory that is supported by the eerie ending of Friday the 13th: A New Beginning. And not only that, it's also backed by comments from the filmmakers themselves. The makers actually planned to replace Jason with Tommy as the next killer. However, it was only for a brief period, as fan backlash and studio fear quickly buried the idea. But why? Because Paramount needed a new hook after the final chapter. They had killed Jason, but the series was too profitable to end. So how could the franchise continue without its iconic killer? Tommy, with his trauma and obsession, seemed like the perfect replacement. The idea was to show the evil of Jason transferring itself from the killer to the survivor. From early notes and storyboards for A New Beginning, we now know that Tommy was meant to slowly transform into a killer over multiple sequels. By the final film, he would become the new Jason Voorhees completely. Even director Danny Steinman admitted this in interviews. He called Tommy's story arc the birth of a new monster. Actor John Shepherd, who played teenage Tommy, was reported to have performed the role under the impression that his character was on the path of becoming the new killer. But there was fierce backlash. Audiences instantly rejected the idea. A psychological thriller was not what they wanted. They wanted to see the unstoppable brutality of Jason. So by the time Jason Lives began production, Steinman was gone, and McLaughlin was told to bring Jason back at a cost. The message from the audience was clear. Without Jason, there would be no Friday the 13th. McLaughlin later confirmed in interviews that he was explicitly instructed by the studio to scrap the plot of Tommy as a killer entirely and resurrect Jason instead. And hence, in Jason Lives, Tommy was turned into a protagonist who is trying to end the curse. The single act of Jason becoming a zombie turned him from a man into an undead legend, much to the delight of the fans. Even though Tommy never became Jason, he was his greatest mirror. Both were outcasts in their respective worlds. Both of them were scarred and traumatized. But where Jason succumbed to his rage, Tommy continued to fight. In a way, Tommy is the side of Jason which could have been saved, only if someone had helped Jason before his hatred consumed him. Friday the 13th also became a tale of legacy, how violence echoes through generations, passing from one soul to another. Even after Jason Lives, Tommy's story continued in fan novels, comics, and fan films like Never Hike Alone, where he reappears as an older man still trying to keep Jason buried. The idea that he can never escape that darkness remains the most tragic part of his legacy. He's proof that evil isn't always supernatural, sometimes it's psychological. Marvelous verdict. Imagine if Paramount had stuck to their original plan. Friday the 13th could have become a psychological saga instead of supernatural horror. That version would have turned the series into the era of psychological horror. But that's not what fans wanted. They wanted the legend. They wanted the mask, the machete, and the monster who never stays dead. And like that, Jason's supernatural era began. He was back. And was also bigger and more supernatural than ever. But maybe, in some twisted way, Jason's curse never vanished. Because, who knows, Jason never really died. It was just a new face to haunt. Whatever it might be, deep down, Tommy Jarvis will always be remembered as the one man who killed Jason Voorhees and almost became him. What do you think about this? Do you think Tommy would have made a terrifying Jason? Tell us what you think in the comments. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.